Welcome to Right Fit Leader, a podcast from Alec, Broadfoot, and the Hire with Confidence team at VisionSpark. This is where visionaries, entrepreneurs, and leaders learn how to hire leaders, lead better, and build teams that last. Through expert insights, real client stories, and conversations with top leaders, you will hear how we find A players for your business. This is Right Fit Leader.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Josh Smith, a key part of the VisionSpark team. Josh brings diverse experience from telecommunications, nonprofit, and manufacturing industries to his work at VisionSpark. With a background that spans frontline roles, management, and human resources, Josh offers a unique perspective on leadership and team success. A proud graduate of Lake Erie College, Josh lives in Galloway, Ohio with his family and enjoys fishing, traveling, and cheering on his kids at the ball field. Josh serves as my director of client services. He oversees our search consultants and all of our client projects. Josh has been a part of the VisionSpark team for 5 years. Welcome, Josh.
Hello, sir.
We are going to be talking about hiring mistakes today. So we spend every day helping companies hire right fit leaders. And one of the most common questions we get is, what hiring mistakes should I avoid? Mm-hmm. So Josh, what is probably the most common hiring mistake that our clients make?
Well, I think that's a very open question. And I think a lot of times where we love to start from the hiring standpoint is clients being really vague about the person or the position. You know, a lot of times people or clients or visionaries in particular will come in and they will really think they understand what they want until you go through a process of really, truly, fundamentally define the role. I think there's an opportunity there. Alec, have you seen additional thoughts when it comes to clients being vague about the position, or like someone thinking they knew what they wanted when they first started and then ultimately it just became a completely different thought
Yeah,
process?
absolutely. I hear that all the time where, you know, they're like, I need a salesperson, and they talking to a friend and they're like, well, there's this guy in my pickleball league. He's in sales. He needs a job. And they hire him or her and then they start working and there's a mismatch. And so, you know, the number of times that we hear that, it's so often. And I love the proverb. I think it's 26:12. It says, an employer who hires a fool is like an archer who shoots at random. And so, you know, we see clients just hiring people without taking time to define the role.
Yeah. Do you believe, like, when clients struggle with defining the role or try to understand the solution of defining the role, is it because they're trying to choose from what they preconceive the role is, or is it truly not understanding or the role or the person or the values or the character? Is it just shooting in the dark, like you're saying?
Yeah. So it's a lot like we do in our process, Josh, where you know, they don't take time to understand what behaviors, traits, and values they want in the person. What background do they want to have? And then really taking time to define the position. What does success look like? Yeah. And it's very random. And, you know, it's like, you know, putting a square peg in a round hole without doing that. And so it's not just VisionSpark that we observe this. I mean, it's been researched, it's been proven. You know, someone who's been out there a while, Barry Deutsch, just published an article on LinkedIn about this, where it's the number one thing in both small and big companies where they're not clear on the role.
Got it. Do you believe that's because there's no hiring process? Because I would say mistake number 2, one of the biggest mistakes is the lack of a true hiring process. Yeah,
I mean, that is definitely a hiring mistake that we see a lot. And, you know, someone, you know, in inside sales will hire one way, and then, you know, us visionaries, we hire based on emotion, which we'll talk about here in a second. But we're just like, hey, we want this person. And so, yeah, there's no process. And there are companies out there that have actually a good process where everybody goes through that hiring process. But I think that's where we add value to our clients is, when they experience us in terms of working with us, they see our process, which we call the Hire with Confidence Blueprint. And they're like, wow, we need one. We need a hiring process. And it really should be followed by all, right? It should be throughout the organization.
Yeah. I have so many examples of that with our partners and clients that came in without a process, didn't understand how to hire, and just going through it step by step and helping them really understand how to really work a hiring process to find the right person for the right seat. The value, the proof is in the pudding when you have that process. It's like having a game plan. It's like being a coach, going out to the game. And you can't look to win if you don't have a true game plan or a process to get there. So,
yeah, it'd be like the NBA Finals, which we talk about, right? We do a lot of analogies with sports, but it'd be like going in and you're getting ready to play the Golden State, and you don't have any plan, you don't have any way to stop Steph Curry, and there's no scattering report. There's no plan of attack, and that's going to be a recipe for disaster, right? So every organization, they have a plan on how they're going to win, how they're going to succeed, and I think you can use that for any sport, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things you taught us. As far as their stakeholders, getting their input, getting their buy-in to. It's just like when you go into the NBA final, getting Steph Curry and Draymond Green, and you getting their input on what the game plan could look like, letting them feel like they're a part of that outcome, getting that buy-in, ultimately is going to change the outcome that you're looking for. So the same thing that we do is we want to get that input from stakeholders and those who can help us fundamentally define that role and truly understand what success looks like, because it'll change the outcome of that role.
Yeah, it's so important to get team buy-in, right? So if our clients, let's say I'm the client and I decide I needed to hire another number two, that John's moving on, he's not, but just say he's moving on. And I go out and I hire a friend of mine, and I don't really take time with the team to have them help define the role, who I need at that time to be my number two. And then when that new hire comes in, they're not embraced by the team because they were not part of the process. So it's really important to get team buy-in.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. What's another one, Josh? What is another hiring mistake? We want to pull back the curtain for our clients. So what are some other hiring mistakes?
I think the third one for me, and from what my observations have been over the last 5 years, is really overvaluing the resume. Really looking at that resume like it is the Bible, that's it. There's so many times we see that.
Yeah, they fall in love with the resume like it's, they fall in love with the candidate before they even see them. And the resume more and more have outright lies on them. So, it's 78% now, is 78% of resumes have outright lies on them. 100% of resumes have embellishments, 100%, right? So you really cannot rely on the resume. And more, you have AI writing resumes for candidates. And they put in the job profile, and then they're like, well, what should I put my resume so I can be a top player? I even read in an article that some companies are going to a no resume hiring process. Wow. So, yeah. So that would be interesting, right? You do need some sort of information to understand someone's background, right? But you can't rely on the resume. And we say we don't read resumes, we score resumes. And then when we interview, we don't call it an interview, we call it a resume interrogation, right? Yeah. So Josh, you've done a lot of interviewing. You've probably interviewed hundreds of candidates over the 5 years. Maybe you're in the 4 digits in the thousands, right? I'm curious, when you're doing some resume interrogation, can you think of a candidate when you really started asking them questions, admitted to not being truthful with the resume, or there was a huge surprise that was not a part of your, something that this candidate shared that you weren't thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a situation that comes to mind a couple years ago where a candidate was applying for a COO integrator role. His resume looked very good, from tenure and time, what they were doing. It was almost like they read the position profile and created their resume based upon it. So it was very intriguing, and that's one of the reasons why we want to score them. But then when we went into, having the resume interrogation conversation, we start off by asking about that attraction. Like, what really attracted you to say, I want to take the time and hit apply for this role? And the attraction started off by, really being forthcoming about how good they were, what they would bring to the table, but it never talked about that true wanted factor to the role of, I was attracted because everything that was in that position profile spoke to me, and it's really about how I can bring my talents to this culture. And we was missing that. And then as we were starting to go down the actual experience itself, that individual could not recollect exactly what was put into the resume. So, for example, led a team of 100, employees across multi-sites in different regions. He couldn't regurgitate that information to be able to speak to how he possessed the success in doing so. It was just numbers and just things that he put on that resume. So though that happens more often than not, unfortunately, when candidates will just over embellish, like you said, the inaccuracy of the resume and just almost talk about things and really not necessarily focus on what the truth of the matter is. How were you successful in that actual role when you were doing it?
I remember, it's been a while since I've done the interviewing. I have experts like you and our other team members, but I remember when I was interviewing, doing some resume interrogation, there's one particular candidate, I noticed a gap in their employment. And I said, I'm curious, why did you end employment with XYZ employer? And they said, well, we had a conversation and we decided, together, it was a mutual decision that it was time for me to move on. Mm-hmm. And I said, can you tell me more what you mean by mutual? And they said, well, they were not happy with my performance and we decided to end my employment. I said, so you were fired? And they're like, yes, I was fired. And okay, that's not something you'd see on the resume, but that's important for us. Right. As interviewers do. And I think, at VisionSpark, we're trained to see those gaps and know what questions to ask. And so where our clients make a lot of mistakes is I think they try to do that themselves and they don't know how to truly interrogate someone's background. And they're focused so much on their gut and feeling, which I think that is our next hiring mistake, right? Is deciding based on gut and instinct. And I know visionaries, I put myself in that pool and, before I knew how to hire, it was all about gut. And, I feel great about this person. I like them. They like me. Let's hire them. Right. So what are your thoughts on that hiring mistake, Josh?
It is one of the ones that happens more often than not as well. Like you said, you usually see individuals fall in love with the personality. They may have been a recommendation by someone who they highly trust, right? My mentor said that, Johnny would be good in this role and he needs to be a part of your organization. And that person makes that hire based upon that, without having the thought process of the tools to be able to make the right hiring suggestion. So we see that. I see that a lot. And I see where a lot of our clients or clients in general, they struggle with removing that gut feel and really struggle with understanding that I have to make sure I put this individual through a real hiring process because I feel so good about them. And a lot of things come out. You still maybe feel good about them, but are they the right culture fit for you? Do they get the role? Do they really understand and want the role? Do they even have the capacity or experience to do it? So yeah, I see that a lot. And I would say that the number one opportunity is to how do you remove gut? So I would ask you, Alec, as a visionary, how do you remove gut or that instinct from that decision thought process when you're trying to hire a leader? Like, how do you get rid of that gut, or is it never something that you can get rid of?
Yeah. I mean, it's you got to hire based on data, right? So what does the TIP assessment, the talent impact profile assessment say? How are their mental aptitudes? Do they have a high mental acuity? What is their vocabulary? What is their attention to detail? How does their personality impact it? We're putting them in a position that requires a lot of process. How is their process orientation? What does the tip say about that? If they're more on the creative side, it's probably going to be difficult. So it's focusing on data is really important. And something I do is I know my tendency to hire based on gut. And so I'll have, people like you or John or other team members are part of the process. And I think that is really good. What I would say to other visionaries out there, I would say that if your gut is telling you to hire someone and you're not using any sort of data, you're probably wrong about 90% of the time. So if your gut is telling you not to hire them, if you're just saying, man, there's something off, I don't want to hire this person, you are probably right. I mean, you probably have a 90% chance of being right. There's something in your intuition that is telling you. So, so trust your gut when it tells you not to hire, but don't trust your gut when it tells you to hire. And I think a lot of times, companies are not trained in interviewing. And I read this years ago in a book It's Not the How or the What, it's the Who. It was written by a Harvard professor. I cannot pronounce the name for the life of me, so I'm not going to pronounce the name. But I started laughing because he talks about a typical interview as a conversation between two liars. And you have the candidate telling you how great they are, and you have the employer telling you how great it is to work there. And both of them are lying. And, the employer's like, after the hire, like, you're not the person I interviewed. And the candidate's like, you're not the place that you told me you were. This is not the culture that I was expecting. And so it's a typical interview is a conversation between two liars. So what's another hiring mistake, Josh, that we should share with our clients?
I think you talk about, you went into it, but I think that pool of one person, like trying to hire from one pool of one person and not understanding that the attraction to the role, the attraction to all things is extremely important to the role. See that a lot where I have one person here on my leadership team or somebody, like I said, Johnny, that somebody told me that I need to hire and I want to put them through the process to take the role. What do I need for them to do? And that's always, it seems to become a disastrous situation because you have nowhere to compare and contrast against other skill sets that are way more important, like we talked about the resume.
Yeah, I learned this mistake from my mentor, Fred Crum, about 20 years ago. And he's like, Alec, it's never good to hire from a pool of one. But we all I put myself in the bucket, not as a hiring expert, but as a visionary, as an employers. We narrow it down to a pool of one. And, it's should I or should I not hire them? Where what we do with our process, and when our clients hire us, we invite a large pool of applicants. And so there'll be dozens of candidates we interview, and we narrow it down through our process. I think there's 6-7 different stages, but the final 2 or 3 candidates are highly vetted, and the client can make a much better decision when they can hire from a pool of 3. Hiring from a pool of 4 is really hard. And 2 or 3 is recommended. So, and I see clients all the time when, Josh, we do the right fit profiler, and that assessment is the talent impact profile, our online assessment, which measures mental aptitudes and personality. And it includes our 12 leadership traits that we interview for. And when I remember it's happened more than once, but, I talked to a client and they're like, hey, Alec, I need you to run this candidate through your secret sauce test. And I'm like, do you just have one? I'm like, yeah, just one candidate. I'm curious how many candidates applied. Nope, just one. Any other candidates you interview? Nope, just one. And so it's never good to hire from a pool of one. I think other than hiring based on a resume, I think that is the number one hiring mistake. So other hiring mistakes that we didn't talk about.
I think once you get through all those mistakes and you really figure it out, I think one of the biggest ones, I think at the end of it all, you've done all the work to make sure you found the right person for the right seat, but you lack a strong onboarding process. And what I mean onboarding, it's not, did I order the keyboard? Do I have keys? Did I send the email? That's administrative onboarding. But a true thought process for what 30, 60, 90, 120 the next year, what does success look like? And I mean, I think about even recently working with my team in particular, there was a client that openly knew that they needed help with a true onboarding for their new COO or number two. And we went through a process of providing them with information of what to expect, what to do when it comes to onboarding this new role, because you've never done it before. You've never done it. That's like me saying, Alec, I would love for you to go deep sea fishing with me tomorrow. I'm going to give you this electric reel. We're going to be 300 feet down, and we're going to go fishing for, reef snapper. And I'll just put you out there and say, go figure it out, right? That's not going to work. So you have to have a process or some type of documentation or some type of information that makes this person successful, and they have a plan, a blueprint, to be honest.
Yeah, that's very good. And we're going to devote a whole episode to that. So my number two, John Vidosh, and I were going to be talking about that as well. I always say the hiring process does not stop once the person walks through the door, right? Mm-hmm. The onboarding is still part of it. Mm-hmm. I also see that not hiring based on fit. Yeah. So, and there's been study after study, when they look at what makes someone successful, it's not their resume or background and industry experience, education. It all comes down to fit. Can they work with you, and can they work with your team? Do you enjoy working with them? That's the question that the Four Seasons asks, when they do their group interviews, is would you enjoy working with them, right? And it comes down to that. And if it's no, then they're probably not hired. And so fit is also very important, right? The cultural fit. And time and time again, I've seen companies, before they hire us, they hire someone, their resume is good, they interviewed really well, and they didn't do enough to determine if they're going to fit with the culture. And Josh, we actually, a part of our process, we get to know our client's culture. And then we ask interview questions based on the client's culture. And so we determine if they're going to be a good fit.
Do you feel like it's super important, especially like when you're defining fit and you're trying to identify a culture and extract that understanding, what that level of transparency is in that hiring process when you're being asked questions about your culture, and why being upfront about the culture is important when you're doing a hiring process? Reason why I ask that, there's been situations where you try to identify a culture and they're telling you, we go off our core values, our mission statement, we value people, et cetera, et cetera. And then when we see that individual hired and onboarded, there's been a completely different culture that's been, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Mm-hmm. So he talked to a little bit to why identifying and having that level of transparency and culture identification is important to a hiring process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important, right? You need to know your culture, or if you're working with us, we need to know your culture. Yeah. And, you could hire the wrong person if you don't. And I remember one of our very first clients, and we don't do a lot of work with government agencies, but one of our very first clients, they were looking for a health commissioner for a county. And the person that was leaving was retiring after 20 years. And she had just really big shoes to fill. She was a phenomenal health commissioner. And, like all government, they have committees. And so they had a hiring committee, and they had a pool of 15 candidates they sent us. And we put them through our process. And I remember one particular candidate, their resume was 7 pages long. The candidate included a 5x7 picture of himself. And when we interviewed him, he was bragging beyond belief. He talked about how he was just on the news the night before, and like his ego, you couldn't couldn't fit through the front door. His ego was that big. And so we talked to our clients about this, and they're like, hey, we really like this guy. We think he's the one. I mean, he's got the highest credentials. And I said, you're going to be walking in the fire here, because this guy is going to ruin your culture. His ego is so big, and the person that is being replaced is a servant leader. He's not a servant leader. You're going to see tons of turnover. And, they heeded our advice, and they eventually decided not to hire this person. Yeah. And then a 16th candidate comes into play. We interviewed the 16th candidate, had all the, we call it the who. He had all the who traits, the behaviors, traits, and values. He had led a similar organization. And he came in and not only did an amazing job, but we were commended by the committee. And so we took them out to lunch about 6 months later, and we had people coming up to us, thanking us and saying, man, you found us a rock star. Thank you. And I can only imagine if that client had hired the one with all the initials after his name, the big ego, the picture of himself, it would not have been a cultural fit. So anything else that we want to share with our clients on, common hiring mistakes?
I think one of the ones that we talked about kind of briefly, just overviewing, is the culture. I think culture, that culture piece, understanding culture and how your core values are utilized in your culture. Culture is more important than I think a lot of individual organizations put that much credit on. You hire, you fire, you discipline based upon your core values that affect your culture, and understanding that there's someone in that organization that is going to push the company culture. And typically your number two, your integrator, your COO, they're going to champion it. You want them to champion that from a visionary standpoint for your organization. So understanding, like, if you don't have, or if there's issues within the culture, or understanding how the core values affect the business, that's super important. That's one of the things I remember from day one, is that you preach. I used to say beat it into my head, but that's the wrong way of saying it. But you preached it to me every single day as an individual who came from a corporate setting to a small to medium-sized business, is that, core values and culture are extremely important in my business, and how you do your job every day need to be a reflection of all of those things. So I think that's one of the other common hiring mistakes, if you may, is misinterpreting or undervaluing what the culture and your core values mean to not only hiring somebody, but disciplinary actions and even firing. And you can't just put your core values or culture to the side because you're enamored with an individual, or you're enamored with the thought process of growth and scalability. All that's great, but if you do it without a strong culture, it's all for naught.
Yeah. Well said from the individual on my team that we have called the cultural bouncer here at VisionSpark. Right. So Josh is so passionate about our culture. He won't let anyone in the door that doesn't have that doesn't fit with our culture. So lastly, Josh, I got a question for you.
Okay.
What's one piece of advice you give to anyone who wants to build a strong leadership team?
I would say one of the biggest pieces of advice of an individual who wants to have a strong leadership team is it's probably more than one piece, but it's all kind of pieced together. You have to identify each of the roles of what you're looking for each member of your leadership team. So if it's ops, if it's sales, if it's finance, each person plays a significant part in the success of the company. But if you don't define it, a visionary, a COO, they'll find themselves in the weeds every day, which you can't get the things you need out of your leadership team to do so. I think that's super important. I think the other part of that is when you look into to finding a strong leadership team is identifying what you consider success looking like in the next year. For, let's say, ops director or a director like myself in client services, it was told to me success in the next year looks like X, Y, and Z, and we're going to do our very best to get there. But they have to understand there's a level of flexibility as a leader, and if that person as a leader doesn't have a level of flexibility, then you may fail in that role. So when you're trying to create a leadership team, it's bringing this team of superstar individuals, as I may say, to the court, to the field, and each player has to understand exactly what their role is to the success in the final outcome, which is the win. So you can't have a superstar and then you have an individual on the side who is kind of in the corner. Everybody has to play their role for the success, and they have to be able to communicate and work together across the department.
Yeah, great advice, Josh. Well, thank you, everybody. And Josh, we'll let you get back to work. We know you got lots of clients to work with, and working with our team and making sure we're delivering great experience. So thank you for your time today.
I appreciate you, Alec, and thank you.
Thanks for listening to Right Fit Leader, brought to you by VisionSpark. Have questions or ready to hire your right fit leader? Email us at discover@vision-spark.com. Until next time, remember VisionSpark is your go-to partner for finding leaders and building teams.